sin do? It separates you and it saturates you, and sin scars you. Let there be no mistake that sin leaves scars behind. Like that great story of the little boy that just was an habitual liar, and it worried his mother so much. She came to him and said, "Son, I can no longer put up with your constant fibbing and lying." And she said to him, "Son, from now on I'm putting up a plank of wood in the kitchen, and every time you lie, I'm going to hit a nail into that plank of wood." And for the next 6 months, every time he lied, all his mother did was get out another nail and tap it into that plank of wood. And one day the little boy came in there and the whole plank was filled with nails, and it suddenly hit him. And he realized, and he turned to his mother and he said, "Mama," he said, "I can see. I'm going to change. I want to change my life." And he did. And she said, "I'll tell you what, son, every time you are living like you ought to and pleasing the Lord," she said, "I'm just going to keep systematically pulling one of those nails out." And so for the next 3 months, she just pulled out those nails one at a time. And one day the little boy walked in and said, "Mama, all the nails are gone. All the nails are gone." And then he stopped and he said, "But look at all the scars they've left behind." Don't kid yourself. Don't confuse forgiveness with the fact that there are scars. That's where the balm of Gilead comes in. It's where the oil of God's grace is applied. God is the healer. He takes our hurt. He holds us in his hands. He holds us in our scarred condition. And the issue comes when a Christian sins. What does the Bible teach us? And I just want to put these out in front of you today based upon what Jesus himself said. When a Christian sins, number one, sin has found its target. That's what the Bible tells us about this younger son. As a believer, you know Christ. You've trusted him. You've given your heart and life to Jesus, and you fall into sin. What it means is sin has found its target. The Bible tells us that the devil is as a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And he's got your number, he's got my number. And the devil doesn't like the fact that you and I are Christian people. And the more Christian we are, the more the target we become. Spiritual warfare is very real. When Paul said, "Put on the whole armor of God," he was talking to Christians. He wasn't telling people who didn't believe to put on the armor of God. He was talking to Christians. And in Ephesians chapter 4, he says, you put on the whole armor of God so that when sin comes, you will be able to stand against sin. And you've fallen and succumbed to sin like this young man here. The world got you. Satan got you. He's after a gotcha. Sin found its target. The Bible talks about the pride of life and the lust of the flesh. Lust is a very real thing. The lust of the body. And if you and I as believers do not put ourselves in subjection to the Spirit of God continually every day, that lust is going to get you. You're going to give way to it. You're going to follow your eye. You're not just going to look, you're actually going to follow it. You're going to go to where it's looking. You're going to embrace your tongue. It's not just what you say, you're going to eat it. When a Christian sins, sin has found its target. But when a Christian sins, the Father watches and weeps. This picture here of our Heavenly Father is an amazing thing. I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. You and I are mothers and fathers, grandparents. We identify with this. I want you to just think for a moment how you watch and weep when your children sin. I'm sure that some might say, well, I can tell you a lot of worse things, but I tell you there is no more severe pain than for a parent to watch the children that they love sin. And the father here watched him walk away. When you gave in to that sin, God the Father who loves you, to whom you belong, watched you and wept for you as you left his home. When a Christian sins, pleasure is short-lived. Pleasure is short-lived. That's what the Bible tells us here. You know, if you get to grips with this text from verse 14, he spent everything, severe famine, he hired himself. Well, the Bible tells us that he gave himself, he poured himself out on riotous living. You'll remember in Hebrews chapter 11, that great passage of faith where the Bible tells us that Moses had to make a decision not to enjoy the pleasure of sin for a season. So let's take the sin of lust. You, sir, sinned against God when you violated the covenant that God brought you into with your wife. And even though you might have enjoyed the pleasure of your sin, it was only for a season. It was very short-lived. That apple must have tasted awfully good when they bit it, because it was the best apple in the orchard. But that taste soon soured in their mouths because God said, don't do it. Pleasure is short-lived. And the pleasure thrill seek of every human heart is simply the attack of Satan. He entices us. That's why you need to be very careful where your heart is. You and I need to be very careful what we look at, where we go, where we invest our time, the company that we keep. It'll get you just like that. Christians. Pleasure is short-lived. It never survives.